Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a topic that might seem a little, well, hairy. We're going to unravel the secrets of Viking hairstyles, specifically how those magnificent braids stayed put for weeks on end. Imagine, if you will, the brisk Scandinavian air, the creak of long ships, and you, a hardy Norse individual, gazing out at the endless gray sea. Your shipmates are busy, oars dipping in unison, sails catching the wind, and your magnificent braids, meticulously woven, are just there. No frizz, no flyaways, just perfect, immovable plates. You probably won't survive a single Viking raid, let alone the sheer commitment to such intricate hair maintenance. But tonight, we can at least dream about it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Are you winding down after a long day? Or is it a peculiar afternoon activity? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You might picture Vikings as wild, unkempt warriors, all tangled beards and windswept locks. And while the winds certainly were swept, the unkempt part, not so much. Forget everything you thought you knew about Viking hygiene. These folks were, by many accounts, surprisingly fastidious. Think about it. Sailing across icy seas, raiding, building, farming, all while sporting what essentially amounted to a very practical, low-maintenance hairstyle. Or at least, that was the idea. The reality, as we'll gently discover tonight, was a little more involved than just a quick brush and a prayer. For one, the very act of braiding, especially intricate braiding, implies a certain level of dedication to personal appearance. It wasn't just about looking good, though that certainly played a part. It was about functionality. Imagine trying to wield an axe or pull on a rope with loose, waist-length hair whipping into your eyes during a storm. It's an occupational hazard. So, braiding wasn't just a fashion statement. It was a matter of practical survival. Your hair, left to its own devices, could become a genuine nuisance, catching on things, obscuring your vision, or even providing a convenient handhold for an enemy during a scuffle. Not ideal, unless you were actively trying to get a quick trim mid-battle, which I assure you is not the Viking way. We're talking about a culture where personal grooming wasn't a luxury, but a part of daily life. Combs, for instance, are among the most common artifacts found at Viking archaeological sites. These weren't flimsy plastic things, mind you, but sturdy, often beautifully carved combs made from bone or antler. They hint at a people who valued neatness, who understood the importance of detangling and maintaining their hair. And let's be honest, trying to braid tangled hair is a nightmare in any century. You'd probably give up after the first few knots, much like I do trying to untangle my headphones. The sheer volume of combs found suggests that everyone, men and women alike, use them regularly. This isn't just about vanity, it's about health. Keeping your hair free of knots and debris prevents breakage, keeps pests at bay, and generally makes life more comfortable. A well-maintained braid, therefore, was a sign of a person who took care of themselves, who was organized, and who understood the demands of their environment. It was, in a way, a quiet declaration of self-sufficiency. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of combs indicates daily use or perhaps a more ritualized weekly grooming, but the evidence points strongly towards a society that valued hair care. And in a world without modern shampoos or endless hot water, that care would have been all the more important. So, you're in the Viking age, and you've decided that a flowing, unkempt mane just isn't going to cut it when you're navigating stormy seas or, engaging in lighthearted skirmishes. The solution? Braids. But not just any braids. We're talking about braids that could withstand the rigors of travel, battle, and daily life, all without the benefit of hairspray or dry shampoo. How did they achieve this mythical feat? It all comes down to a combination of practical techniques and a rather surprising understanding of natural oils. First, let's address the elephant in the longhouse: cleanliness. While they might not have had daily showers with scented body wash, Vikings were far from the dirty savages often depicted in popular culture. They were known to bathe regularly, often in communal bathhouses or natural hot springs were available. And when it came to hair, they certainly washed it. Not every day, perhaps, but often enough to prevent it from becoming a matted mess. Imagine trying to braid truly greasy, matted hair. It would be a frustrating, almost impossible task. So, a basic level of cleanliness was absolutely essential. You wouldn't want to show up to the chieftain's feast with hair that looked like a bird's nest after a particularly aggressive storm. Now, once the hair was clean, or at least cleanish, the real magic began. The braiding itself. We're not just talking about simple three-strand plaits, although those were certainly common. Viking art and archaeological finds suggest a variety of styles, from simple braids for everyday, were to more intricate designs for special occasions. Think of complex fishtail braids, or perhaps even multiple smaller braids woven together into a larger one. These weren't just decorative, they were structural. Tightly woven braids distribute tension more evenly, making them less prone to unraveling. It's the same principle behind a strong rope. Many individual fibers twisted together create something far more resilient than any single strand. One quirky tidbit that might surprise you is the potential use of animal fats or plant resins to help hold the braids in place. Before you wrinkle your nose, remember that modern hair products often contain various waxes and oils. Lanolin, for instance, comes from sheep's wool and is a common ingredient in hair conditioners today. The Vikings, being resourceful, likely experimented with what was available. Rendered animal fat, like tallow or lard, while perhaps not smelling like your favorite salon product, would have provided a protective coating and a subtle stickiness, helping to bind the hair together. Think of it as an all-natural, very rustic pomade. Historians still argue whether such substances were used primarily for styling or also for conditioning, but their potential role in braid longevity is hard to ignore. You can almost smell the faint scent of something earthy if you close your eyes and really try. The sheer length of Viking hair also played a crucial role. Long hair, when braided, holds its shape much better than shorter hair. The weight of the strands, combined with the interlocking pattern of the braid, creates a self-reinforcing structure. Imagine trying to braid a pixie cut, it just wouldn't work. But with hair that could easily reach the waist, or even beyond, the possibilities for durable, long-lasting braids were endless. This wasn't just about looking fierce. It was about pragmatic self-sufficiency in a harsh world. Every aspect of their appearance, down to the last strand of hair, was designed for efficiency and endurance. So, you've managed to get your Viking hair clean, and you've even sourced some intriguing animal fat for that all-important hold. Now comes the actual weaving, the intricate dance of fingers that transforms loose strands into a formidable, long-lasting braid. While we don't have detailed instruction manuals from the Viking Age, imagine the scroll. Braiding for Beginners, a Seafarer's Guide. Archaeological finds and historical accounts offer clues about the techniques they employed. The most common and arguably most practical braid would have been the simple three-strand braid, familiar to us even today. It's robust, relatively easy to execute, and holds surprisingly well. However, Viking gravestones, artwork, and sagas hint at much more elaborate styles. Think of the intricate interweaving patterns often seen in Norse knotwork. It's not a huge leap to imagine similar artistic complexity applied to hair. We might be talking about French braids or Dutch braids, which lie flat against the scalp, minimizing snagging and creating a much more secure base for the rest of the hair. These techniques, by incorporating new sections of hair as you go, create a tighter, more cohesive structure that is inherently more resistant to unraveling, even when you're battling a sea serpent, or more likely, just a particularly gusty afternoon. The tools used for braiding would have been minimal but effective. Aside from those ubiquitous combs we discussed, you might have had simple bone needles or wooden pins to help guide smaller strands or to secure the end of a braid. Imagine a skilled Viking woman, or man for that matter, as men certainly braided their hair and beards, with nimble fingers deftly manipulating the hair, perhaps using a small, polished antler tool to smooth down stray hairs. There's a certain meditative quality to such a repetitive task, isn't there? A rhythmic tug and weave as the braid slowly takes shape. It's almost enough to put you to sleep just thinking about it. Another crucial element in the longevity of these braids was likely tension. A loose braid unravels quickly, whereas a tightly woven one can withstand considerable jostling. This would have required not only skill, but also patience. You can imagine a Viking mother braiding her child's hair before a long journey, pulling each section taut, ensuring every strand was firmly in place. This isn't just about aesthetics. It's about making the hairstyle last for days, even weeks, without needing to be redone. Think about camping. You want a hairstyle that can survive a few days without a mirror or a full hair care arsenal. Vikings lived that reality every day. One quirky tidbit about Viking grooming that often goes unmentioned is the potential for hair styling assistance. While many people might have braided their own hair or had family members assist, for truly elaborate styles, it's not unreasonable to imagine someone with particular skill being called upon. Perhaps an elder woman, renowned for her intricate knotwork, would be sought out before a major feast or a significant journey. After all, a truly magnificent braid wasn't just hair, it was a statement. Historians still argue whether professional braiders existed as a distinct role, but the communal nature of Viking life suggests a natural exchange of such skills. You might even pay them in a few silver rings, or maybe a particularly tasty piece of smoked salmon. With your hair now securely braided, whether in a simple plait or an intricate Dutch braid, the next step in long-term Viking hair maintenance involved accessories. These weren't just pretty additions. They were functional elements designed to keep your masterpiece in place for days or even weeks of active living. Forget delicate bobby pins. We're talking about sturdy, often beautiful pieces made from bone, antler, wood, or even precious metals. The most common accessory you'd find would be combs. Yes, we've mentioned them, but their importance can't be overstated. While used for detangling before braiding, they also served as a kind of hair pick used to gently tease out tangles that might form over time without disturbing the main braid too much. Some combs even had holes, suggesting they might have been worn in the hair or hung from a belt for easy access. Imagine you're mid-journey, a rogue gust of wind whips your hair, and rather than despair, you simply reach for your trusty bone comb and gently neaten things up. It's a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. Beyond combs, Viking women, and sometimes men, would adorn their braids with hairpins. These weren't the tiny, U-shaped pins we use today, but often longer, more decorative implements. Think of pins with carved animal heads, intricate knotwork, or even simple, elegant designs. These pins would be thrust through the braid, securing it further against movement. They acted like a structural anchor, preventing the braid from loosening at the base or shifting uncomfortably. A well-placed hairpin could mean the difference between a neat, practical hairstyle and a perpetually annoying, slowly unraveling mess. It's like the difference between a properly hammered nail and one just resting loosely in the wood. One holds, the other, well, it doesn't. Another interesting accessory often overlooked is the potential use of ties or bands. While less preserved in the archaeological record than bone or metal, it's highly probable that strips of leather, wool, or linen were used to tie off the ends of braids or to secure sections of hair. Imagine a simple leather thong wrapping around the end of a long plait, preventing it from fraying. These humble materials would have been readily available and incredibly practical. Sometimes simplicity is truly the ultimate sophistication, especially when you're trying to keep your hair out of your face while wrestling a particularly stubborn goat or an enemy warrior, depending on your daily itinerary. One quirky tidbit: some Viking Age depictions and sagas hint at warriors tying their long hair, or even their beards, in a knot at the back of their heads, sometimes secured with a ring or a decorative clasp. This wasn't just for battle. It would have been a practical way to manage very long hair, keeping it from snagging on equipment or getting in the way. It's essentially a Viking version of a man bun, but with considerably more gravitas. Historians still argue whether such elaborate knots were common for everyday wear or reserved for specific occasions. But the practicality of securing unruly hair is undeniable. You can almost picture them meticulously arranging their locks, perhaps with a focused intensity usually reserved for forging swords. While we've been admiring the intricate braids of Viking men and women, let's turn our sleepy gaze to another quintessential aspect of Viking male grooming: beards. For Viking men, a beard wasn't just facial hair. It was a powerful symbol of status, wisdom, and masculinity. In many ways, the beard was the male equivalent of the elaborate braided hairstyles sported by both genders, requiring its own special brand of care and attention. You see, a well-maintained beard wasn't just about looking fierce, although it certainly helped. It was a sign of a man who took pride in his appearance, who was capable of self-discipline, and who perhaps had a bit of disposable income, or at least disposable animal fat, to dedicate to his grooming. Imagine trying to eat a hearty stew or shout commands during a raid with an unruly, food-laden beard. Not exactly a picture of dignified authority, is it? So, just like with hair, practicality intertwined with prestige. Viking men likely braided their beards too, especially longer ones. Just as a long braid kept head hair out of the way, a braided beard would prevent it from snagging on equipment, getting caught in the wind, or generally becoming a nuisance. These beard braids could be simple single plaits or more elaborate multiple braids, sometimes adorned with small rings or beads made of metal, bone, or amber. These weren't just decorative. They also added a bit of weight, helping the beard to hang neatly and stay put. You can almost hear the soft clinking of beard beads as a Viking chieftain strode past, a surprisingly soothing sound, if you let your mind wander. The care for these magnificent beards would have mirrored that of the hair on their heads. Regular combing with those ubiquitous bone combs was essential for detangling and removing any stray bits of food or debris, because even Vikings had crumb issues, I'm sure. And yes, they likely used those same natural oils or fats to keep their beards soft, moisturized, and importantly, less itchy. Imagine trying to get a good night's sleep with a perpetually scratchy beard. It just wouldn't do. One quirky tidbit about Viking beards is their legal significance. In some Norse societies, pulling or tugging on a man's beard was considered a grave insult, sometimes even leading to legal repercussions or a duel. It was an affront to his honor and masculinity. So, while you might think of it as just hair, for a Viking, his beard was an extension of his very being, a statement of his worth. Historians still argue whether the specific legal codes regarding beards were universally applied or varied greatly by region, but the general sentiment of their importance is widely accepted. You wouldn't want to accidentally tug on the wrong beard at the local assembly, unless you were actively seeking an early retirement from life. With those impressive beards and sturdy braids, you might be wondering what exactly the Vikings used to keep their hair so well nice. They certainly didn't pop down to the nearest equivalent of a modern drugstore for a bottle of shampoo and conditioner. Their hair care products, while simple, were surprisingly effective and rooted in the natural world around them. The primary cleaning agent for hair would have been soap, though not quite the bar soap you imagine. Viking soap was typically made from animal fats, like tallow, mixed with ash, which contains lye, a natural alkali. This combination creates a rough but effective cleansing agent. It would have cut through grease and grime, leaving hair feeling cleaner, even if it wasn't quite the silky smoothness we expect from our modern formulas. Imagine the scent probably smoky and a bit earthy, rather than floral and sweet. It's a scent that would perfectly complement the smell of an open fire and the salty sea air. Beyond basic cleansing, Vikings likely employed various natural substances to condition and maintain their hair and beards. We touched upon animal fats, but let's delve a little deeper. Lanolin, as mentioned, naturally occurs in sheep's wool and would have been present if wool was used in any washing solutions or even if they simply brushed their hair with unprocessed wool. This substance is an excellent emollient, meaning it helps to moisturize and soften. Another possibility is plant-based oils, such as flaxseed oil or even oil extracted from certain nuts or seeds. These would have provided a protective layer, helping to prevent breakage and add a subtle sheen. It's like a very, very old-school hair oil, designed not for sparkle, but for resilience. For those more elaborate styles, or just to keep flyaways at bay, they might have used resins from trees. Think of the sticky sap that oozes from pine or birch trees. When warmed slightly, this could have been used as a natural, albeit stiff, styling gel. It would have provided a firm hold, keeping braids and knots tightly bound for extended periods. This isn't just speculation. Various indigenous cultures throughout history have used tree resins for similar purposes, showing a universal understanding of natural fixatives. You can almost feel the slight stickiness on your fingers as you try to work with it, a gentle reminder of the raw materials available in their world. One quirky tidbit: some archaeological finds suggest the use of plant extracts for tinting or enhancing hair color. While not widespread like modern dyes, certain plant materials, like onion skins or walnut husks, could produce subtle reddish or brownish tones. This wasn't about dramatic makeovers, but perhaps about subtly enhancing natural color or covering grays, a very human desire regardless of the era. Historians still argue whether such practices were purely cosmetic or held some symbolic or ritualistic significance. But the fact remains that Vikings, even in their hardy existence, likely had a certain appreciation for personal presentation beyond mere practicality. You might find a gentle hint of a golden hue in someone's beard, not from the sun, but from a carefully brewed botanical concoction. Now that we've explored the fascinating world of Viking hair care products, let's step back and consider a broader point: how hair wasn't just a personal choice, but a powerful cultural identifier for the Vikings. In a world without passports or national flags as we know them, your appearance, especially your hair, could instantly communicate who you were, where you came from, and even your social standing. Imagine yourself a longship full of Norsemen, docking at a foreign shore, perhaps Anglo-Saxon England or the Byzantine Empire. Your intricately braided hair, perhaps with decorative rings or a well-groomed, substantial beard, would immediately set you apart. It wasn't just a hairstyle, it was a uniform. The neatness, the specific braiding patterns, the very presence of a well-maintained beard, these were all visual cues that differentiated a Viking from the local populace, who might have sported shorter, less elaborate styles or different grooming traditions. You wouldn't mistake a Viking for a nervous monk, that's for sure. This distinction wasn't always positive, of course. For those on the receiving end of Viking raids, these distinctive appearances could evoke fear. But within their own communities and among other Norse groups, these hairstyles were a source of pride and recognition. You could potentially tell a seasoned warrior from a young thrall just by the meticulousness of their braids or the length and adornment of their beard. It was a subtle, non-verbal language spoken through follicles. Consider the sagas, those epic tales of Viking heroes and their deeds. Often, physical descriptions of characters include details about their hair and beards. A fair-haired warrior or a long-bearded chieftain isn't just a descriptive flourish. It's a character marker, instantly evoking an image and hinting at their prowess or status. It's the equivalent of a modern hero always having perfectly windswept hair. Even after leaping from an exploding car, except in the Viking Age, it actually had practical significance. One quirky tidbit lies in the sheer volume of combs found in graves. This isn't just about personal hygiene. It suggests that presenting oneself well, even in death, was important. A comb buried with an individual speaks volumes about the value placed on hair care throughout their life. It implies that their appearance, and by extension their identity, was something they carried with them beyond this world. Historians still argue whether these grave goods were primarily for practical use in the afterlife or held more symbolic meaning, but their consistent presence is undeniable. You want to look your best for Valhalla, after all. So, when you picture a Viking, don't just think of a horned helmet, which, by the way, they almost certainly didn't wear into battle. Instead, picture a person with meticulously braided hair, perhaps glistening slightly with natural oils, and for the men, a formidable, well-tended beard. It was a statement of identity, a badge of belonging, and a testament to their surprising dedication to personal presentation. Beyond the practical and social aspects, Viking hair and braids often carried deeper symbolic meanings and were sometimes associated with superstitions. In a world where unseen forces were believed to influence daily life, even something as seemingly mundane as hair could be imbued with significance. Think about the sheer effort involved in maintaining those long, intricate braids. This wasn't just about looking neat. It spoke to a certain level of discipline and order in a chaotic world. Hair, particularly long hair, was often seen across many ancient cultures as a source of strength or vitality. For the Vikings, perhaps a long, well-kept braid symbolized the wearer's own resilience and connection to their heritage. It was a visible manifestation of their enduring spirit, quite literally woven into their appearance. You wouldn't see a weakened, sickly individual with a magnificent, flowing braid, unless it was for a very brief, poignant moment in a saga. We know that hair cutting could hold particular significance. For instance, in some Norse traditions, cutting a man's hair against his will was a profound act of emasculation and dishonor, akin to stripping him of his status. This reinforces the idea that hair was intimately linked to a person's identity and power. Conversely, dedicating a lock of hair to a god or a sacred oath was a powerful gesture, a physical representation of a vow. It's like shaking on a deal, but with much higher stakes and a more permanent commitment. Even certain types of braids might have held specific meanings. While concrete evidence is scarce, it's plausible that particular braiding patterns or adornments were associated with certain clans, marital status, or even religious beliefs. It's not a stretch to imagine a young woman sporting a particular braid to signify her readiness for marriage, or a seasoned warrior wearing a style passed down through generations of his family. These were subtle codes, understood by those within the culture, a quiet communication woven into the very fabric of their lives. One quirky tidbit: some scholars suggest that the act of braiding itself could have had a talismanic quality. The intertwining strands, forming a protective barrier, might have been seen as offering a degree of magical protection or good fortune. Imagine a sailor braiding his hair before a perilous voyage, infusing each plait with prayers for a safe return. It's a very human tendency to seek comfort and control in the face of uncertainty. And what better way than to weave it into something so personal? Historians still argue whether such beliefs were widespread or confined to specific rituals, but the association of hair with supernatural power is a recurring theme across many ancient cultures, and the Vikings were likely no exception. Perhaps your long, heavy braid helped to steady you during a rough crossing, imbued with the quiet strength of your ancestors. So, you've mastered the braids and understood their deeper meanings. But even the most perfectly woven plait needs a refresh eventually. This brings us to the fascinating and perhaps less fragrant topic of Viking washing rituals and frequency. Forget the notion of a daily shampoo and rinse. Viking hair care operated on a different rhythm, dictated by available resources and practicalities. Water, especially hot water, wasn't always a readily available commodity. While coastal communities and those near natural springs might have had easier access, inland dwellers or those on long voyages would have had to be more resourceful. This meant that full hair washes probably weren't a daily affair. Instead, archaeological evidence and historical accounts suggest a frequency of perhaps once a week or even less often, depending on circumstances. You wouldn't want to waste precious drinking water on your hair when you could be, drinking it. When it was time for a wash, it often involved a communal effort. Imagine groups gathering by a stream, a lake, or even a prepared basin of water. The soap, as we discussed, would have been a rudimentary mix of ash and animal fat. This would have been rubbed into the hair, worked into a lather or something approximating one, and then rinsed as thoroughly as possible. It wouldn't have produced the foamy, aromatic experience of modern shampoos, but it would have effectively removed dirt, sweat, and whatever else accumulated during a week of Viking life. Perhaps there was even a bit of good-natured splashing, as long as it didn't interfere with someone's perfectly maintained beard. Another crucial aspect of maintaining hair between washes was dry grooming. Those ubiquitous bone combs were not just for initial detangling. They were used regularly throughout the day to keep hair neat, remove loose hairs, and perhaps even to stimulate the scalp. Think of it as a constant, gentle maintenance routine. It's the equivalent of brushing your teeth, but for your hair. This constant combing would have helped to distribute natural oils down the hair shaft, keeping it conditioned and preventing excessive dryness. One quirky tidbit suggests the Vikings might have used specific types of clay or earth as a kind of dry shampoo or scalp cleanser. Certain mineral-rich clays have absorbent properties, capable of soaking up excess oil and grime without needing water. While concrete proof is scarce, it's a practice seen in various ancient cultures and would have been a practical solution for those times when a full wash wasn't feasible. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread practice or confined to specific regions, but the ingenuity of using natural resources for hygiene is truly remarkable. You can almost feel the fine dust working its way through your braids, a gentle, earthy exfoliation. Now, imagine you've just gone through the whole ritual. Clean hair, perhaps a touch of animal fat for conditioning, and your braids are meticulously woven and secured. What happens when you embark on a long journey, say, a transatlantic voyage or a months-long trading expedition? This is where the true genius of the Viking braid reveals itself. Its remarkable ability to endure travel. Life on a longship was anything but gentle. You're exposed to the elements: wind, salt spray, rain, and the constant rocking motion of the sea. Loose hair would have been an absolute nightmare. It would quickly become matted, tangled, and a genuinely irritating distraction. But a tightly woven braid? That's a different story entirely. The interlocking strands provide a compact, robust structure that is far less susceptible to the forces of nature. It's like the difference between a loose pile of ropes and a neatly coiled, secured one. One stays put, the other ends up in a tangled mess at the bottom of the boat. The braid's inherent durability meant minimal maintenance was needed while at sea or on the march. You wouldn't have a luxury of daily washing or elaborate rebraiding. Instead, those essential combs would come out for quick tidying, perhaps to work through any superficial tangles that formed around the edges of the braid. And those subtle applications of fat or resin would have provided a degree of water resistance, helping to repel moisture and keep the hair from becoming overly damp or frizzy. Think of it as an ancient, organic waterproofing layer. Another significant benefit of the braid during travel was protection. It protected the hair itself from damage caused by exposure and friction. Long hair, left loose, can easily snag on clothing, equipment, or even rough surfaces. Braids, by keeping the hair contained, minimize this wear and tear, reducing breakage and split ends. This meant that after weeks or months away, your hair, while perhaps a bit dusty and smelling faintly of smoked fish, would still be in relatively good condition, ready to be unbraided and rebraided for a triumphant return. One quirky tidbit comes from the sagas, which occasionally mention warriors tying their hair back specifically for journeys or battles, indicating a conscious choice for practicality over flowing aesthetics during demanding times. While we don't have detailed logs of hair management strategies at sea, the sheer logic of it stands. Historians still argue whether certain braiding patterns were associated with specific voyages or purposes, but the fundamental wisdom of securing hair for demanding conditions is a universal truth. You'd have bigger things to worry about than a bad hair day when facing down a storm or an unfamiliar coastline. While the serenity of a well-maintained braid might suggest a peaceful existence, the reality of Viking life often involved intense, chaotic moments, especially in battle. How did those elaborate hairstyles fare when shields clashed, axes swung, and arrows flew? Remarkably well, it seems, thanks to their practical design. You see, for a warrior, long, flowing hair could be a severe liability. Imagine it, a stray lock obscuring your vision during a crucial parry, or worse, providing a convenient handle for an opponent to grab. Neither scenario is ideal when your life depends on quick reflexes and an unobstructed view of the battlefield. This is precisely why the braid became not just a fashion statement, but a piece of essential battle readiness. A tightly braided hairstyle, especially one that was pulled back or coiled on top of the head, effectively removed these hazards. It kept the hair contained, close to the scalp, and out of the way of weapons, armor, and the general mayhem of combat. It essentially served as a self-contained hair helmet, albeit one made of hair itself. This allowed warriors to focus on the fight, not on wrestling with their unruly locks. You wouldn't want to explain to Odin that you lost your last battle because your hair got caught in your own axe handle. Furthermore, some Viking accounts and depictions suggest that warriors would occasionally tie their hair in a knot at the back of their heads, perhaps secured with a strong piece of leather or a metal ring, much like the man bun concept we touched on earlier. This provided an even more secure, compact style, ideal for absorbing impacts or preventing snagging. It's the ultimate tactical hairstyle, designed for maximum functionality under extreme pressure. One quirky tidbit suggests that some warriors might have even braided their hair around their helms, if they wore them, which wasn't always the case, or integrated it into their headgear for extra padding or stability. While highly speculative, it speaks to the creative ways Vikings leveraged every available resource, including their own hair, for practical advantage. Historians still argue whether specific battle braids existed as a distinct style or if warriors simply adapted their everyday braids for combat. But the emphasis on practicality is a consistent thread. You can almost feel the tension in the braids as a warrior lunges, knowing that every strand is securely in place. Having explored the practicalities and symbolic weight of Viking hair, let's cast our gaze a little wider and consider how their hair practices stacked up against their contemporaries. The Viking Age was a time of dynamic cultural exchange, and while the Norse certainly had their own distinctive styles, they weren't operating in a vacuum. Comparing their grooming habits to those of other cultures helps us appreciate their unique approach. Consider, for instance, the Anglo-Saxons in England. While they also favored longer hair, their styles often appear less intricately braided in historical depictions and archaeological finds. Anglo-Saxon men sometimes wore their hair simply parted and flowing, or perhaps tied back with a simple band. The elaborate, multi-braided styles so common among the Vikings seem to have been a more distinct Norse trait. It's almost like the difference between a casual ponytail and a meticulously crafted cornrow. Both are practical, but one definitely screams art project. Further south, in continental Europe, particularly among the Franks or Saxons, shorter hairstyles for men were becoming more prevalent, influenced by Roman traditions where short hair was often seen as a sign of civility and order. So, when a Viking longship landed, the flowing, often light-colored, and heavily braided hair of the Norse would have been a stark contrast to the close-crop styles of some of their European neighbors. It was a visual declaration of cultural identity, a subtle form of psychological warfare before a single axe was swung. Even in the Byzantine Empire, with its rich tapestry of cultures, male hairstyles often leaned towards shorter, neater cuts, sometimes with elaborate headwear for the elite. The Byzantine view of barbarians often included unflattering remarks about their wild appearance, which likely included their distinct hair and beards. This highlights how appearances, then as now, often fueled stereotypes and perceptions. One quirky tidbit is the anecdotal evidence of Vikings actually adopting some foreign grooming trends after prolonged contact, though this was often subtle and slow. It wasn't a sudden swap, but rather a gradual absorption of elements. Perhaps a Frankish-style trim picked up by a seasoned trader who had spent years abroad, or a new way of tying a beard learned from a Slavic merchant. Historians still argue about the extent of such cultural cross-pollination in grooming, but it's a testament to the fact that even the most formidable cultures are not entirely impermeable to outside influences. You can imagine a Viking returning from a long journey, subtly tweaking his beard style, much to the quiet amusement, or perhaps mild confusion, of his kin. So, how do we actually know all this fascinating stuff about Viking hair? It's not like they left behind ancient YouTube tutorials. Our understanding comes from a combination of incredible archaeological evidence and careful interpretation of what's been unearthed from their settlements and burial sites. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from a sheer number of combs that have been found. As we've mentioned, these aren't rare artifacts. They're incredibly common. Found in homes, workshops, and especially graves, these combs, made from bone, antler, or wood, speak volumes. Their presence in graves suggests that personal grooming was important enough to be carried into the afterlife, a silent testament to the value placed on neatness and appearance. It's like finding a person buried with their favorite hairbrush today. It tells you something about them. Beyond combs, archaeologists occasionally unearth more direct evidence: preserved hair itself. In certain unique conditions, like bog bodies or extremely dry environments, hair can survive for centuries. While rare, these finds offer invaluable insights into natural hair color, texture, and even remnants of braids or ties. Imagine carefully brushing away centuries of peat to reveal a lock of hair that hasn't seen the light of day since the Viking Age. It's like a direct line to the past, a silent whisper from someone who lived and breathed in that distant world. Another crucial source of information comes from grave goods beyond just combs. Small metal rings, beads, and fragments of leather or textile ties found near skulls can indicate how hair was adorned or secured. While the hair itself might have long since decomposed, the durable accessories remain, giving us clues about how they were worn and what kind of hairstyles they might have fastened. It's a bit like finding a single earring and trying to reconstruct the entire outfit. One quirky tidbit: some Viking Age art, like carved runestones or intricate metalwork, occasionally depicts figures with distinct hairstyles, often showing braids or elaborate knots. While these are stylized representations, they offer a visual corroboration of the textual and artifactual evidence. Historians still argue about the precise accuracy of these artistic depictions versus real lifestyles, but they undeniably show a cultural emphasis on distinctive hair. You can almost see the artist meticulously chiseling those tiny lines to represent a warrior's impressive plate. While archaeology provides tangible proof, much of our understanding of Viking hair and grooming also stems from sagas and other literary clues. These ancient Norse tales, though often embellished for dramatic effect, offer invaluable glimpses into the cultural norms, values, and even the everyday appearance of the people they describe. The sagas, passed down through generations before being written, frequently feature descriptions of characters that include details about their hair and beards. Terms like fair-haired, black-haired, long-bearded, or braided-haired are not just casual observations. They are often character attributes that convey status, identity, or even personality. A hero might be renowned for his magnificent golden mane, while a villain might be depicted with an unkempt beard, hinting at his moral disarray. It's the ancient equivalent of a director using costume design to give you immediate insights into a character. Beyond simple descriptions, the sagas sometimes weave hair into plot points or significant cultural moments. We've touched on the idea of pulling a man's beard as an insult, and the sagas contain instances where such an act leads to serious conflict or even bloodshed. This reinforces the idea that hair, especially a man's beard, was intimately tied to his honor and social standing. It wasn't just a physical characteristic, it was a symbol of his reputation. Imagine the dramatic tension as a rival reaches for a chieftain's beard, a silent challenge that speaks louder than any words. Another intriguing aspect is how the sagas sometimes portray women's hair. While less frequently detailed than men's beards, there are mentions of women's long hair and the various ways it was styled, sometimes even indicating marital status or social rank. The emphasis on beautiful, well-kept hair for women aligns with archaeological evidence suggesting significant attention to female grooming. One quirky tidbit: some sagas even contain poetic kennings, metaphorical expressions that allude to hair. For instance, a sword might be referred to as the beard shaver or the hair's cutter, in a roundabout way. While perhaps a bit gruesome for our sleepy journey, it demonstrates how deeply ingrained hair was in their everyday language and cultural consciousness. Historians still argue about the exact historical accuracy of every detail in the sagas, but their cumulative weight paints a vivid picture of a people who truly cared about their appearance. You can almost hear the soft rustle of finely braided hair as a hero recounts his daring deeds by the flickering firelight. So, as our journey through the intriguing world of Viking hair draws to a close, we arrive at the modern interpretations and legacy of these fascinating grooming practices. It's clear that the image of the Viking, particularly their distinctive hair and beards, has captivated imaginations for centuries, enduring far beyond the actual Viking age. Today, you see echoes of Viking hairstyles everywhere, from historical dramas and fantasy films to modern fashion runways and street styles. The popularity of long hair, intricate braids, and robust beards among both men and women often draws direct inspiration from the romanticized image of the Norse. It's a testament to the enduring appeal of these powerful visual symbols. Think of the modern Viking beard trend or the resurgence of elaborate braided styles. They're not just fleeting fads, but a nod to a heritage that prioritized strength, resilience, and a certain wild elegance. However, modern interpretations are often, shall we say, a bit more comfortable than the historical reality. We have access to an endless array of shampoos, conditioners, styling gels, and heat tools that the Vikings could only dream of. Our braids don't have to last for weeks through sea storms and battles. They just need to look good for a night out or a cosplay event. It's a luxury the original Vikings wouldn't have understood, but one we certainly appreciate. The legacy of Viking hair goes beyond just aesthetics. It subtly reminds us of a culture that, despite its fierce reputation, placed a surprising emphasis on personal grooming and presentation. It challenges the simplistic stereotype of the dirty barbarian and reveals a more nuanced, sophisticated approach to daily life. It's a quiet testament to their resourcefulness, their ingenuity, and their understanding of how to make the most of what nature provided. One quirky tidbit about modern interpretations is the ongoing fascination with Viking horn helmets. Despite compelling archaeological evidence suggesting they were ceremonial and not worn in battle, the image persists. It's a bit like how we prefer to imagine their hair was always perfectly styled, even if the reality involved a bit more practical griminess. Historians still argue about the precise reasons for such persistent misinterpretations, but it highlights how easily popular culture can shape our understanding of the past. You can almost feel the gentle tug of a modern braid, a soft connection to a powerful, ancient world.